Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you. Yeah. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the final session for today. We have with us today Elizabeth Rottenberg, David Wills, Peggy Camuth, Pascal Ambro, and Michael Nass, which really, they need no introduction. You all know them, right? So they're going to be talking about the archive at Princeton, but also the publications that are coming out. So I'm going to hand it over to Katie to start the session. And then we're just going to open it up for questions about the archive and the publications and just have a free-flowing discussion.
Thank you, Nicole, for giving us the opportunity to speak. And really, this is a very informal session. And the thing we're most interested in doing, I think, is having a conversation with everyone and answering any questions there might be. We realized, Nicole and I, a few months back, that since the last Derrida Today, a lot has changed in the world of Derrida publications. And there are also some exciting things that have been sort of quasi-public or public-ish knowledge up until now that we also wanted to talk about. So the big news that is old news at this point is that several years ago, at the initiative of the Derrida family, Derrida's publications left Édition Galilée in Paris and moved to Édition du Seuil. And we were fortunate enough to be able to create a new collection devoted entirely to Derrida's posthumous works. I'm hoping that these are books that now look familiar to you. We publish now at the rate of 2 volumes per year, 1 seminar. Here is the first volume of Hospitality, edited by Peggy and Pascal Anne. We also publish once a year 1 other volume, and we could say more about what those are, how they're selected, who does them. The answer is anybody in this room could become a person editing one of these volumes. It is not at all restricted. This example being Le Calcul des Langues, an unfinished text that sort of quietly appeared during the pandemic, an unfinished text, the first text book project text that Derrida wrote in 2 columns, which Jeff Bennington found at Derrida's house after his death, and which he and I put together in this little edition here. There's a team of us who publish the seminars. It's some members of the original team that were overseeing the seminars. Marc Crépon has recently rejoined us, and we're very happy to have him rejoining us on the seminar editorial team. And then these other textes inédits, again, as I said, are open. Sort of anyone is welcome to propose a text for publication. The criterion being it is previously unpublished work by Jacques Derrida. I don't know if Peggy, you want to say a word about translation before I then maybe say something about the other archive.
Let me use this. Yes, well, there's a significant overlap between 2 teams. The editorial team that is responsible for these volumes, and as Katie just mentioned, this is the latest volume to appear, and is that right? Yes. And Pascal Anne Bro and I edited it. There is a second volume of the Hospitality Seminar, which was offered in 96, 97. This one is 95, 96. And then Pascal Anne and I are finished. We're basta, done.
Say when it's coming out.
It's coming out in the fall. I'm sorry. The second volume will be out. And that is the schedule that Seuil has kept to very faithfully. And that was a problem with Galilée. We never knew when the volumes were coming out, and there was a long delay, right, Mark? Mark remembers. So I was saying there was an overlap between 2 teams, this editorial team, which also includes Ginette Michaud, and Marc Ripon, who is not on the podium, but I think all the rest, oh, and Jeff Bennington, of course, who is not here at this conference. But and then the team that is responsible for the English translations, and that is everybody sitting here, plus 2 other colleagues who are not here. No, three. Jeff, I keep forgetting Jeff. Oh, well, he's forgettable. Do not repeat that.
This is being recorded.
This is being recorded. Oh, I am so dead. I am so dead. I had witnesses. But so the overlap has been really productive. And just to give you the latest example, as Pascaline and I are finishing this week the editing of the 2nd volume of Hospitality, I am finishing or putting out for comment to my co-team members the translation of the 2nd volume of Hospitality, and that series, as you probably know, is published by the University of Chicago and has been since the beginning. And I have to say, University of Chicago has been magnificent as a publisher, as a reliable outlet, and really supportive of anything we give them, including the inédit. Because this volume as well has been translated by Katie and Jeff, right?
In progress.
In progress, okay. So that's just to tell you what is forthcoming. The translations, always there's a lag, of course, but we're trying to close the gap in that lag. And we have our work cut out for us for the next, well, we don't know how long.
I just don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, that's kind of a presentation, an overall presentation of the 2-pronged attack on Derrida's legacy. That doesn't sound right. You know what I mean.
Should we say a few words about UNIC before Princeton? With the translation project, the way it works?
Would you?
Well, since we began talking about the translation of these seminars, some of you know, and some of you actually have come to the Derrida bootcamp that takes place at IMEC in Normandy, where there's some Derrida works there, some archives work. So Armando and Adam, I think, have survived. But we go and meet for 4 or 5 days, and we actually review a draft of the translation by the translator who's been working on it. And we, sit at the table and go over it word by word. So it's a little arduous, and when you're on the hot seat, it's exciting. But that's what we do. So, the translations, are read carefully, very carefully by about 16 people.
So then the piece that I alluded to earlier of news that has been sort of semi-public up until now is another initiative of the Derrida family that they brought to Princeton University, which, as many of you I'm sure know, now houses Derrida's personal library, the vast and super interesting personal library, which I invite you all to come visit and consult. It is open to all. You do not have to have any affiliation. You do not have to have any justification. You show up, you can visit. It is open to the public. So, Princeton housing the library was approached by the Derrida family with the project of creating an online archive of the entirety of Derrida's seminars. So, we're talking about the things we call seminars, properly speaking, as well as all of the other teaching in courses starting from around 1959 up until the Beast and Sovereign seminars in 2002. So that project has been underway for some time. All of the materials that are held at UC Irvine have already been digitized, and very slowly and with, in fits and starts for various reasons, a team of grad students at Princeton, including some people here in this room, have been working on, just sort of cleaning up those files and getting them ready to go online. And we just are receiving, literally today was put in the mail a hard drive from EMEC with their holdings that they have of, original materials from the Derrida teaching materials. Those are on their way to Princeton. So the hope is that in a time frame of probably about 12 months still from now, maybe as little as 9 months, but 9 to 12 months, we will go live with a site that will not at this point have a lot of bells and whistles, although my hope is that someday that could change. But all of these archival materials will be available to the public online, so all of the seminar materials. Eventually, the hope is that we will have things like a search function and other features that will make it even more sort of productive for research. But the materials themselves will be available online. Again, look, see here 12 months from now for that.
Okay, I've got a question.
Go ahead.
So, Michael, David, Peggy, Elizabeth, who do you decide who's going to edit things? I'm just curious, right? How do you decide who's going to edit and what is coming out?
I send out a doodle poll, and that was actually how
do we decide?
How do we decide who edits what?
Oh.
Well, right now we have an agreement with Éditions du Seuil to publish all of the seminars that were taught at the EHESS, so from 1984 on, and the sort of the initial publication project had, I think, the very smart idea to publish in reverse chronological order the sequences, right? So this is what we've seen, what we saw with some sort of interruptions up until recently, and we've resumed that, right? So the hospitality sequence is coming out now. Before that was the Par jour pardon sequence of 2 seminars, and the next sequence that we're now going back to, right, so the next one in reverse chronological order is a combination of the 2 seminars that currently are labeled témoignage, and then the one that immediately precedes it on The Secret, which after review we realized really constitutes part of the same sequence or series, and they form a coherent series of 3 seminar years. Yeah,
yes, thank you. That's not a question, that's just a few words that I really want to say, because having all of you in face of me, in face of us, I wanted to thank you sincerely for the incredible job, the amazing job you do, because I did this job twice actually, to edit the 2 volumes of Death Penalty, and I know the incredible work it makes. I know how it is stressful, how you may make mistakes, how you have very often difficult decisions to do. And really, I want to thank you, because I know all what you do. And there is something also that I want to say. The Derrida studies, the Derrida scholars, even in France, couldn't be the same if you wouldn't do this job. And the second thing that I would like, okay. And the second thing that I would like to say is that there is a strange paradox, but a paradox which says a lot of things. It's that to make the reading of Derrida even possible in France, for the French readers, for the French students, we need an American team. And for me, that says a lot.
Peggy, Elizabeth, David, Michael, you haven't spoken yet. Any comments?
Nothing to say. I mean, that would.
What did we do? Act out something?
Sorry? No, I mean, we were talking last night about how we were going to organize this discussion, and we've had other versions of it. But I was thinking, I have nothing to say about the editing because I haven't yet had the experience of editing a volume. We're about to, starting next year. I've had the experience of translating, but in a sense, I have nothing to say about translating either. I don't know that any of us have anything to say. Let's say that. Let me say that. I don't know that any of us have anything to say outside of the experience of the group. I'll let others speak for themselves, but my feeling is that that the way that one works on the translation, I don't know, it's something mechanical. It's something that just happens in a sense. But the fact that one does that with the prospect of meeting together as a group, where one is going to be exposed to the corrections but the suggestions also, and the good faith help of and assistance of a whole group that one trusts. Plus, as Peggy, I think, mentioned, various others, students, for example. Phil was also there, who's in the room, who had been part of that team at one summer or another. That group becomes a very cohesive unit that gives an extraordinary energy and a dynamic to the operation, and makes the translating, from my experience in any case, makes it really worthwhile.
And you've been doing that for a long time, right? Even before Princeton, right? So you're, yeah. So
yeah, this has been going on for
well-oiled machine.
13 years or something.
12 or 13?
12 or 13 years.
We started in 2008 with the translation workshop, not having any idea how it was going to work, and we figured it out as we went. And I think we've oiled the machine now pretty well. And obviously, we haven't been meeting in person since 2019, but we are resuming in a few weeks. We always meet at early July, when it's usually beautiful in Normandy. And although this year we had to make the difficult decision not to invite any graduate students, simply because we didn't want to take the risk of exposing more people to potential problems if they recur. And we all know, because we're all sitting here in masks, that there's a possibility of that recurrence. Anyway, we hope to resume inviting students the following year.
Peggy just said that we've been learning as we go. And one sign of that is the fact that initially we thought that this seminar was the written text that Derrida had in his computer, or that he had typed up, or that he had written. And we realized after the fact, many of us had been in Derrida seminars, that he oftentimes broke away from his text and adds things extemporaneously. And those of you who have ever heard Derrida speak in public, you know that he didn't speak in fragments. He spoke in perfectly formed sentences that form perfect paragraphs. So it was oftentimes really important to add many of those oral comments. But that is a lot of work. Taped comments, right? So starting in about the early 1980s. As far as we know, there may be tapes from earlier, but from the early 80s on, there was usually on Derrida's desk 10 to 12 tape recorders that would go off at 30-minute, 45-minute, and 1-hour intervals, and students would discreetly come up to the desk and turn over the tape. We've been able to get tapes for most of, for example, the last 2 volumes on hospitality, and they're absolutely precious comments. And Derrida reformulating what he's said in a written fashion, reformulating it orally, and it's absolutely, I think, essential, and it's a value that the published seminars will have over simply the raw text that you will find in the archives.
Well, also, exactly. I wanted to add that to what Katie was describing, that what's going to be online are going to be facsimiles, if I'm not mistaken, pretty much.
Photographs.
Well, I
The
mean,
archive, yeah.
but they are not going to be formatted, edited, finished, cleaned up, although you use the phrase cleaned up, but I'm sure in a different sense. And obviously, they're not going to have any of the material that Michael just mentioned that he didn't write, but just made up.
Yes, that is the case. What will be online are photographs digitized. It's going to be like reading, as if you made a PDF, right? I mean, you'll have the images, extremely high resolution images, but it's a different beast altogether. But maybe the last thing that I have to say is that I was insisting on the openness of these non-seminar publications, the other unpublished texts that we put out at the rate of 1 volume per year in the spring, and maybe just open a parenthesis and say that the volume out now that I've not yet received my physical copies of is a 1960-61 course, an amazing text called Penser c'est dire non. It was just 4 sessions of a course taught to, I think, undergraduates in philosophy at the Sorbonne in the winter of 1961. It's a commentary on this phrase by the then very important, now less known philosopher Alain, one named Alain. But it's an amazing course where, among other things, you see Derrida taking off from Alain, sort of traversing some really unlikely suspects along the way, but then deploying Husserl, and then what feels like a very sort of early and very fresh engagement with Heidegger to arrive at his thinking of an originary affirmation, and even the double affirmation, the oui. Right, it's 1960. It's pretty remarkable, and coming out of it's in the middle of telling them how to write like a dissertation, like a paper on this Alain phrase, penser c'est dire non. It's pretty amazing, and it's thanks entirely to Brieux-Gérard, who was a student of Peggy's at USC. He's just finishing up his PhD now there. He came and did the workshop with us, then went and was in the archive, found this text, which is there for all to find and see, taught himself to read Derrida's handwriting, which, as you know, is extremely challenging and is a skill set unto itself, and then pursued the editing and publication of this. And then next spring, we will be seeing as Thomas, you must be here. Yeah, Thomas Mercier, ici présent, is putting together a volume on Derrida and Althusser that will contain correspondence and a host of other archival materials about their relationship and encounter, both personal and intellectual. And just, we're all super excited about that. So, part of the project, both of putting the materials online and of the translation project and of this editorial project, but maybe in some way, especially of the Inédit, is to give a future to, and a survival for, give this corpus and this thinking its best chance, right, or its best chances, part of which means publishing, putting together the most carefully edited and translated volumes we can, but also bringing in scholars who are just coming up, who are now students, who are earlier in their careers, and bringing sort of other people into this editorial process and also into conversation around the work.
Okay, we have some questions from the audience now. So first it's Stella and then it's Thomas. Right.
So first of all, I can only second Marc Crépon's expression of the profound gratitude that I think we all feel for this tremendous work that you're doing. And thank you. And I wanted to ask you, maybe Katie will answer this question, if you would remind us what is the stage of the English translations? What's I've kind of lost track at this point. What's coming out when and what's been out recently?
I may not know as well as,
Well,
as Peggy.
David.
So David is so we're waiting now on,
The first volume of Perdu et Pardon should be out in a couple of months, I think. And the second volume is in copy editing, which I expect to get back any moment. Perdu et Pardon. So Perjury and Pardon is the English title. And as I say, the first volume is about to appear with Chicago sometime soon, maybe not till the fall. And the second volume, I guess it will take, will be about the same time next year.
the following a year or a year and a half. It often takes at the University of Chicago. And then the last volume, there is a third volume in line, which is Hospitality 1, which has already been translated and reviewed at EMEC. And so that's just in line waiting for publication. It's like airplanes waiting to take off. On the run, yeah. So that's just the slowness of the American publishing.
And COVID.
And COVID, yes, and
Yeah.
COVID.
This is not a question. I just wanted to kind of reiterate something that Katie touched upon earlier, because it was a little bit quick, and I would really encourage you to go to Princeton and see Derrida's personal library. First, because it's super easy, as Katie said. They're really nice. You can do pretty much what you want. Their archivists are kind, helpful, and they are not like over your shoulder at every second. Also, there is something really inexhaustible about what you can find in Derrida's personal library. I'm saying this because maybe in the beginning I didn't realize that. But then, like, when you ask for a box, you ask for a certain book that is in that box, and then you find another book that just happened to be in that box, and it's just like this kind of a hyperlink logic of getting lost, but finding this little piece of paper or this little like dedication or on the book, notes. Everything is meaningful when you look at all these, and this is really the magic of the archives. I mean, some people are more drawn to it more easily than others, but I really would encourage you to do that, if only to attack the legacy of Derrida, but in the best possible way. Thank you.
And I'll take you out for a drink after, when you come out of the library at the end of the day, as Thomas and I did. Yeah.
Any other questions for people? Yeah, okay.
Thanks. I just had a question. Derrida's work is obviously full of examples of inassimilable archival fragments, the most famous of which is the Nietzsche "I've Forgotten My Umbrella." But you could also think of the famous dedication of Freud's father of the Bible in Hebrew to his son. So I just wanted to ask if all of you who've been working on Derrida's manuscript, his archives, if you can think of frustrating, exciting, interesting examples of inassimilable fragments or things that you've had difficulty analyzing or coming to terms with. What is the most kind of frustrating example maybe that you can think of?
Have you seen Derrida's handwriting? Because Derrida did not begin using a typewriter until I think around 1967, somewhere around there. And from that point on, he never went back. I mean, except in personal correspondence or kind of circumstantial notes. But he used an electric manual, I think, at first, or maybe it was an electric at first. But in any case, he was devoted to his electric typewriter. With some trepidation, he went digital in. He started mid 80s. By 87, he was using a word processing on an Apple II computer. I mean, one of the first Apple home computers, an early one in any case. So you have these handwritten seminars, as Katie was mentioning, like the one that just was finished by my student Brieux very early. But then Pascaline and I also co-edited La Vie, la Mort, Life, Death, and it was typed, but it was full of handwritten notations, often somewhat lengthy. And of course, there were not audio tapes, fortunately, I think. So we had a lot of difficulty deciphering the handwritten notes, and that was, I mean, it was not the whole seminar that was handwritten, you understand. Do you remember specific examples?
Yes, and you will in a second too.
What?
That's the quincaillerie modern style. That's the one.
Oh, right.
Hang on. Nobody can hear you if you don't use the microphone. So
No, well, Pascaline should
no.
tell this, because you were the one that figured it out. Go ahead, explain it.
I think we. Yes, so we come across scribblings by Jacques Derrida, and we had those long discussions among ourselves, and a couple of us, and I think I was in favor of that reading. Jeff was too, I know.
That was Jeff.
Well, I was supportive of that.
You
too.
supported Jeff in that?
Yes, I did. And maybe we were wrong in the end, but we seem to have read quincaillerie modern style. So modern style hardware store of sorts.
It's just wrong.
Yeah, so we argue a lot.
Maybe I could just, since we're talking about life, death, maybe Peggy could tell the story better. But when she was editing La Vie, la Mort, we were all under the impression, because all the bibliographies put La Vie, la Mort as 1974, 1975, and Theory and Practice the next year, so 75, 76, and Édition Galilée came out first with the Theory and Practice, 1975, 76. On the cover, that's right. So, but as Peggy and Pascaline were editing La Vie, la Mort, and what they had was a photocopy of both sides of the text. In other words, the side that Derrida typed on, and then the other side, which is usually blank, but not always. And in this particular case, there was on the back, it was very clear that Derrida was using scrap paper that he had, and several, maybe 20 sheets, were scrap paper announcing a meeting of mobilisation for the Greffe group. And a lot of us had thought a lot about Greffe, and Greffe starts in 1975. So how is he writing in 1974 about a group that hasn't even been constituted yet? And then they began looking around more, and there were odd inconsistencies with secondary sources. And then we realized, well, actually, this course was being given to train students for the agrégation. So the question then was, could we find anywhere a trace of the agrégation subject for 74, 75, 76, 77? And indeed, through a friend at Grinnell named Alan Schrift, he was working on the question of the agrégation in French university system. He was able to furnish, in fact, the subjects that were taught during the year in anticipation of the exam question. And the exam question for 1975-76, not 74-75, was indeed La Vie et la Mort. So not La Vie et la Mort, but La Vie et la Mort. And that kind of sealed the revision and the date. But it was really seeing what was on the back. So if you ever have archives, you want to photocopy both sides of the piece of paper.
We have a question from Naomi. She's online. And Naomi, do you want to speak yourself, or shall I just read the question? Is she around? Okay. She's joined. Hang on.
I think it's a simple question. You could read it, Nicole, but thanks for such a lovely seminar. Also, just want to say, Katie, if you're going to do those, when you put them up online, please, can we have a very high resolution copy of that early seminar on le silence? Because it's almost impossible to decipher, even with a magnifying glass. Thomas and I were poured over it and had to debate a lot. We still haven't finished, or it's chiefly my job, but I was relying on his help. But yeah, I just wanted to clarify, will the online resources just be seminars and how far going back, or will they include other materials like interviews?
Naomi, well, first, I don't know if you and Thomas were looking at, if you were at Irvine or if you were at EMEC. Well, you were at EMEC, that explains it, because EMEC has the photocopy of that and not the original. Je me trompe?
I think for this one, you won't hear me now, but I think for this one, there were like 2 sets. It was a bit strange. So we don't know.
Okay, well, in general, for all of those early materials, I mean, the vast majority, there are a few exceptions. The originals are held at Irvine, and yes, we have extremely high resolution images of those. I mean, where you can see like the grain of the paper and the watermark, and if it's written in pencil, you can see, you know, sort of all of that little sort of uneven trace that the graphite leaves on the paper. So, I mean, extremely high resolution, and we made it a principle that we were only putting online things that were, you know, originals as opposed to photocopies, unless it's something like a photocopy of text that were going to be quotations to be read aloud in the seminar, in which case the photocopy is the original, but only in those cases. And then to answer your other question, your sort of bigger question, Naomi, the actual question, it's only the teaching materials. So we used as our guide what Irvine in their finding aid has classified as teaching materials. You know, it's one of the series in the archive. And we started with their very earliest ones. And then we filled it out at the moment in Derrida's life where he started, you know, depositing or consigning his materials to EMEC. We then pick it up with the EMEC materials and fill it out all the way to the end. So it's the totality of the teaching materials and nothing else at this juncture.
Thank you. We've got 3 more questions, and I think then that will be more or less it. We've got Gil and Mark and Alice.
So I'll reiterate the gratitude that has already been expressed. I want to add incredible admiration as well for the dedication that is involved. I suppose my question is, as far as I know, the word philology doesn't appear very often in Derrida's work. The word paleography, as opposed to paleonymy, doesn't appear very much. And I'm kind of wondering whether any of you is going to write about what it means to really transform. I mean, you all, of course, professional readers, but being a professional reader is not being a paleographer or a philologist. It's not the same thing. When Derrida edited The Origin of Geometry, as far as I remember, he doesn't do the paleographic work and the philological work that might be involved. And I'm just wondering, you know, the man, of course, talked about the return to philology. I'm wondering if any of you is going to be writing about the return to philology that is involved in the project that you have all embraced, and what it might mean, right? I mean, we are, I think a number of us are still arguing about Derrida, philosophy, literature, yes? But there's something about a dramatic transformation, and please understand, I began with my admiration, but the extraordinary transformation that you all putting yourself through, yes? But also what that might mean to reflect on the Derridian corpus in a way that I don't think can entirely be called Derridian, and if it is, I wonder if it can be formulated in some way. And I want to hope that some of you, maybe collectively or individually, might have something to say about this. And so on the spur of the moment, I'm wondering whether you do.
I can start. I think this is an amazing question, and thank you for it. First, I'll say some of us are secretly early modernists and are trained as philologists and paleographers, but that's sort of a parenthesis and not really an answer. I mean, I will say, as one starting point, that when we collectively make decisions about our editorial best practices, and we drew up something of a charter, or revised in this kind of new wave of the publications, a charter, we reflect on those decisions in light of Derrida's thinking, right? And so I think, I mean, it's interesting, right? How could we necessarily, or in some kind of absolute way, divorce the thinker of the archive and the thinker of writing and the thinker of the trace that Derrida is from the work that goes by the name philology or paleography, et cetera, right? As if those skill sets were the domain of the historicists and, and others who have nothing to do with what it is that we do. And I think Derrida himself gives attention that certainly could be called, philological to text, which is different, is different from the kind of practice that's going on here in the constitution of these texts, but I think not divorced from the practice that's already happening in what we call deconstruction. That would be very quick, too quick, but that's my first take.
Anybody else would like to comment on that question? No? Yes?
No, I will let my question, but I will just have a word about what Gil just said now. But, we have to remember that Derrida paid always an incredible respect to the text, and also he made in many places some observations when the text was not good translated, when the text was not well edited, and he hated some freedoms that could be made by some editors, editing text not at the level they have to be edited. And I think the respect this board, I'm part of the team, the respect we have, all of us, to Derrida's text is exactly, it's not a matter of philology, it's not a matter of paleography, it's also respect that he had himself in the text he read and used to. It's just a matter of, it's exactly what I think Nietzsche called in German Redlichkeit. And Redlichkeit is, I don't know how it is translated in English, but in French is translated by the word that I really like, which is probité. It's an intellectual probité, which is intellectual Redlichkeit. How you say probité in English? Probity. It's a matter of probity, just like that.
Thank you, Alice. And then we'll start to wrap up.
Thank you. It's a bit random, but I just sort of wanted to just mention something that I remembered yesterday, which I'd forgotten, but which comes off the back of what you were saying about archives sort of being inexhaustible. At the National Archives in London a few years ago, there was a project to transfer some records that were held at the Foreign Commonwealth Office to the National Archives. And I was working on that project and then stumbled across a file which was about his arrest at the airport in Prague when he had drugs planted on him. So the file was just really fascinating because it was lots of philosophers calling for his for justice for him, but just to add to the complexity of sort of Derrida in the archives, just in case it's of interest.
Thank you. We can probably take one or two more questions, or one more question. Has anyone got anything? Do we need anything final from the panel that you would like to say? Okay. Can I just say thank you? Yes, thank you for everything you do. And I want to say it now. I'm being told to move into the camera. Can I go here? I'll go behind the podium. It's just easier. So I do want to say thank you to Elizabeth and David, Michael, Pascal, Anne, Peggy, and Katie. Yes, exactly echoing what Mark said. It's absolutely brilliant that, Derrida is still being published, and it's because of you. And it's because of you that we're all here. And I want to say thank you now, because you're not going to be here tomorrow, and I've got a big thanks tomorrow. So I want you to just hear it, okay? And can we please give them a big round of applause?